This just in from Manhattan, where day 16 of Shawn Diddy Combs' federal trial took an absolutely seismic turn. When the courtroom doors opened, no one expected the man who walked through them. Actor, activist, and global icon George Clooney. That's right, Hollywood's own moral compass stepped into the witness box with receipts. And not just words, honey, evidence. Chilling, game-changing, heart-stopping evidence. So, what did George say that had the courtroom frozen, jaws dropped, and Diddy clenching his fists in disbelief? And more importantly, what forced one of the most respected men in entertainment to break his silence and risk it all? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about Hollywood, power, and the price of silence.
I'm here to shatter the silence. Diddy isn't just a monster. He's an entire machine. And I've witnessed it all.
Breaking news from Manhattan, actor and human rights advocate George Clooney made a stunning appearance as a witness on day 16 of the federal trial of Shawn Diddy Combs. Speaking publicly for the first time, Clooney delivered explosive testimony tied to grave allegations against the music mogul, with details said to have the potential to shift the entire course of the case.
It all began with 9 simple words. Diddy isn't just a monster, he's a machine. And baby, George meant every syllable. His testimony was not just a personal account, it was a detonation. The crowd gasped. The judge leaned forward. Even the stenographer had to pause for a second, because when George Clooney opens his mouth, people listen. And this time, he didn't come to play, he came to dismantle.
People keep asking, why didn't George speak out sooner? Let me tell you why, because he had the tapes. Because he had someone inside the FBI. Because if George uttered even one wrong word, someone would vanish. I've seen it happen to 3 of my friends already. George survived because he mastered the art of silence.
According to Clooney, this didn't start last week or even last year. It's been simmering for over a decade. Back in 2013, Diddy started cozying up to George at high-end galas and glitzy parties. But this wasn't about music or movies. This was about something much darker. Diddy wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing influence, real power, the kind that lives behind closed doors in boardrooms and foreign embassies. And he thought George was his golden ticket.
I never wanted to stand here, but there are things I've seen, truths I can't carry to my grave. Diddy didn't just harm individuals. He constructed an empire of crime, and I was one of its victims.
At a white party in the Hamptons, Diddy allegedly told Clooney that rap was just the beginning. What he really wanted was a seat at the global table, rubbing shoulders with the UN, the Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum. And George, being adored in both Hollywood and Washington, was the shortcut.
He even bragged about wanting to forge new black leaders in American politics, but I quickly saw through it. It was just a pretext to advance his own selfish agenda.
But George, darling, he saw through the act. He knew what Diddy was really up to. So instead of shutting him out, George made a decision. He decided to play along. Not because he was interested, but because he wanted to get inside the tiger's den and expose the beast for who he truly was. Over the next year, Clooney attended parties. He smiled, he nodded. But behind the scenes, he was documenting, listening, and digging. And then, one night, everything changed. He received a white envelope with no return address. Inside, just a GPS coordinate and a time. No message, nothing else. A few minutes later, a cryptic text followed. Wear black. No phones.
I brought along a tiny camera concealed in my watch, a device I'd long relied on to protect myself in unpredictable situations.
Most people would have run for the hills. But George? He grabbed his hidden camera watch and followed the trail. It led him to a deserted amusement park. Not the kind where kids get cotton candy, the kind where secrets hide under concrete. Clooney described a steel door hidden behind a mural. Beyond it, a cold corridor, guarded by men with eyes like ice. They didn't ask for ID. They already knew who he was. At the end of the hallway, the door opened into a room George described as a ritual space. Dim lights, low, vibrating music, celebrities, billionaires, even government officials, all cloaked in robes, sipping wine, laughing like it was just another Friday night. But it wasn't. George said this wasn't a party, it was a ceremony, a performance of power. And at the center of it all, Diddy. And here's where it gets disturbing. Clooney claimed that the people in that room signed non-disclosure agreements before entering, that they weren't coerced, they were complicit. This was a club, an elite circle of influencers who protected one another with silence, because one whistleblower meant everyone went down. He saw enough to haunt him for a lifetime. People being used, abused, paraded like toys. But he didn't intervene. Not because he didn't want to, but because he needed to bring the evidence out. If he made one wrong move, he knew he'd never get another chance.
I never took part in what they did, but I stayed close, watching, memorizing. And that haunts me every single day.
So he documented everything. He used his watch camera to photograph the guest ledger, a book on a pedestal where guests were required to sign in. George didn't sign, but he snapped the previous page, names that would set both Hollywood and Washington on fire if released. And that wasn't all. He recorded videos, chilling footage of what really happened inside those walls. One in particular showed Diddy himself giving direct orders while a blindfolded young man lay on a crimson cushion surrounded by masked guests. Clooney described the scene as a ceremony of humiliation. It wasn't entertainment, it was abuse, all orchestrated by a man who believed he was untouchable.
They called it entertainment. To me, it was a crime, a desecration of humanity. And at the heart of it all stood Diddy, grinning like a king on a throne of depravity, orchestrating every move with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable.
He kept these videos locked in a hidden safe in his Lake Como estate. He encrypted the hard drive. He made copies. And still, he stayed silent because he was terrified. Not for himself, but for his wife, Amal, and their children.
I knew that if Diddy found out, my family and I would pay a heavy price. I couldn't bring myself to confront what I'd seen, the horrors I witnessed, or the steep cost I paid for daring to gather evidence against him.
He shared how in 2014, after attending another one of Diddy's private events, he was attacked. Drugged, left unconscious, he woke up in a hospital, battered and broken. And soon after, a package arrived at his door. Inside, a USB drive. On it, footage of the attack, and in its final frames, an image of his wife Amal, bound and bruised. That was the final straw.
He told me he was working on a major deal, a business venture that required me to connect him with influential figures to smooth things over. He promised that if I complied, he'd release Amal and put an end to it all.
From that day forward, Clooney was trapped. Diddy used that footage to blackmail him into compliance. Clooney was forced to introduce Diddy to high-profile officials, push fake deals, and even unknowingly help launder money. But he kept everything. Every email, every transaction, every whispered phone call.
I held on to them to ensure that he and those shielding him could no longer manipulate and ruin the lives of others.
One message from Diddy read, "You're mine now, George. Never forget it." Another included a $1 million consulting fee, disguised as a legal transaction. But Clooney wasn't just a pawn. He was gathering the receipts. And now, he's unloading every single one of them. When asked why he didn't go to the authorities sooner, Clooney didn't blink. He said it was fear. For his wife, his kids, his friends who had already vanished after crossing the wrong people. Power protects power, he told the court, and silence is their favorite weapon. Then came the final blow. Clooney accused not just Diddy, but his mother Janice Combs of helping smooth over the fallout at these elite gatherings. She wasn't just the mother, he said. She was the fixer, the one who made sure no scandals ever touched the family name. By the time George stepped down from the stand, the courtroom was in shock. Diddy's legal team could barely breathe. And Diddy himself? He just stared, stone-faced, like the walls were finally closing in. So now the question is, what happens next? Will these revelations lead to more arrests? Will the names in that guest book come to light? And how deep does this rabbit hole go? George Clooney took a risk most wouldn't dare. He stood up to a machine fueled by fear and silence. And now that the lid's been blown off, the fallout may be historic. So if you want the truth, real truth, not the sugar-coated headlines, stick with us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because this is just the beginning. And trust us, you're going to want to be here when the next bombshell drops.